Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor for me to speak at the plenary session of the Jewish World Congress about general and meaningful problems regarding not only religious communities in our modern world, but which will affect the future of living together of the whole human society. An especially important question is the freedom of religious practices in Europe. Religious freedom has been on the list of human rights and values for centuries. This was not always the case. The societies of the ancient times, that of the Middle Ages, and one of the early New Age looked upon religious generally as the most important public affair. In the book of Exodus, the Ten Commandments don't appear as the result of mere human wisdom or as the majority resolution of a decision-making body or as the disposition of a ruler, but as the command of God. This is followed by a set of acts referring especially to the alliance of the Almighty with its nation. Other nations had also tried to indicate in their laws their place in the cosmos. When in different cultures the human society was arranging space and time around itself, it constructed a calendar that termed feast days and was always looking for integrity with the entire universe. It endeavored to create harmony between the human and the divine sphere. Christianity followed with religious respect to divide the week into 7 days, as it is known from the Bible, though dedicated not the Sabbath but the following day to the Lord. As long as religion was the most important public affair, the coexistence for the different religious communities was a big challenge. The Persian Empire was the classic example of an empire where the central power respected and acknowledged the sovereign rights of the different nations and their laws, at least in many areas of human life. This type of view could be looked today as an ethnic self-government. We can observe a similar phenomenon in the Roman Empire as well as in the German Roman Empire. Different rights concerned the Saxons, the Swabians, and particular cities enjoyed special rights. The presence of a religious minority in this context, of course, raised special problems. The legal possibilities of religious life with its own traditions, though were not defined by religious freedom, but rather by the notion of privileges given to the community. We know from century-long painful experiences that autonomy of this kind often proved to be insufficient. In modern times, the notion of tolerance tacitly meant that the state, the power, knew which was the right religion, but for the sake of peace accepted others. This tolerance, of course, was often understood very narrowly. In most of the European countries, blasphemy and cursing were punished until the 18th century and even after. The power of the state often regarded natural catastrophes, epidemics, and wars as the punishment of God. It was convinced that cursing, offending God, can cause extreme danger to the whole society. As a consequence of the Enlightenment, the question of religious tolerance and religious practice has been changed. A type of rational religion has almost become an official worldview, which considers basic behavioral norms as the demand of common sense and the precept of natural law, which basically goes back to the Jewish Christian tradition. In this view, the freedom of practice of different religions counts as a value, but it is subordinated to the rational rules considered important by the state. Referring to public order and even to public morals, which are not defined exactly, and also to the requirements of public health, the valid international agreements look on the practice of some human rights as limitable. From the beginning of the 20th century, this enlightened view of natural law has gone through crisis. From this point on, actually, several phenomena of life, such as particularity of the practice of religion, have been judged according to different viewpoints. Earlier, majority principle seemed to be sure directive because the lawmakers believed on the basis of natural rights that the majority of the people can recognize the objective and rational rules of behavior. But if such rules don't exist or are not recognizable, then the practical value of the majority principle creates further problems. This is especially true for very complicated economic, social, and natural scientific questions. Because of the refusal of natural law or the objective natural moral in the 20th century, it happened, for example, in Germany, that on a majority basis accepted leadership implemented racism and inhumanity for the directive of state power. Because there were and always can be situations when it cannot be an excuse for an inhuman action that the culprit did not break the prevailing laws of his own country. The biblical thinking believes that we are able to recognize the rules of right action. When recently in some countries the prohibition of given religious practices is on the agenda, it's not anymore referred to the results of natural sciences or to the requirements of hygiene. There were hygienic directions, state directives also at the end of the 19th century. The Hungarian Ministry of Education, for instance, came into conflict with the Jewish Orthodox community because the state ordained that circumcisions had to be made by physicians or at least in required strict medical attention. The reason for this was the development of infection-related knowledge of the natural sciences. The different religious trends found their own rational answer to his problem in different times and ways. Similarly, problems arose at the times of great epidemics of the modern times around the administration of the sacraments in the Catholic Church. Just think of the communion of the sick or the anointing of a dying person. In these cases, the Church herself was successful in introducing special regulation which, according to the medical scientific knowledge of the age, tried to prevent the spreading of epidemics. Present critics are different from the earlier natural scientific viewpoints. As a matter of fact, religious practices are not judged by objective rational rules or by the knowledge of natural sciences, but according to prevailing majority opinions in committees or in larger circles. Arguments are advanced against kosher butchering, for instance, that contain value judgment about or behavior towards animals. So, it is not about the question of whether you can butcher an animal for consumption or not. By the way, this question is also beyond the competence of natural sciences. Neither is it about if someone would want to torture animals, which is against the spirit of the Bible. Behind accepting meat consumption, there is already a value judgment, namely that sustaining human life is more important than the life of a given animal? This question is not simply a natural scientific question. At the same time, on the basis of the Bible, we consider the protection of the created world as extremely important. Nowadays, we can hear a lot of information about many animal and plant species being endangered. The introduction of regulations in hunting and finding rational rules in protecting the environment are important and opportune. The Catholic Church, as well as the Hungarian Bishops Conference, has lately issued important documents about this topic. And if it is about the later psychological effects of a religious action, then it's always significant to ask in what instance are these effects concretely observable, in what instance are they inevitable? This is a basic question, since the ideal of human being is mainly based on a given worldview. There is a danger that someone might supervise the content of religious convictions from a subjective point of view, which is declared ideal according to a certain worldview. This clearly would oppose the right of religious freedom. We can reasonably hope that on the basis of the history of our religions, we will be able to adopt real scientific recognitions in the details of our religious practices. However, we should do it on the basis of our own autonomy without being encroached or traditions and values. A too strong state intrusion into this area could be accompanied by the danger that the basic values of religious freedom will be violated by some conviction of other worldviews. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, allow me to speak about the relationship of our religious communities here in Hungary. It looks back on a more than 2 decades-long tradition that the leaders of our most important, historically oldest religious communities conduct talks together, and on occasions they agree on common grounds in their relationship with the state. There are several organizations in Hungary which provide a framework for Jewish communities and Christian churches for common discussions, occasionally for conferences, or for technical literary activities. One of these is the Christian Jewish Society, which has been publishing in separate volumes the results of mutual dialogues and research since 2001. The other organization consists of the official representatives of the different Christian churches and Jewish communities. The latter one is the Hungarian section of the International Council of Christians and Jews. After the week of ecumenical prayer in January 2012, we organized for the first time the Day of Christian-Jewish Dialogue and Prayer in Budapest, which excited broad interest among religious people. This January, moreover, dialogues and meetings were organized in other cities as well. In Hungary, it has sometimes been necessary, due to some grave anti-Semitic actions, that the leaders of Christian churches raised their voice against racism, hatred, and anti-Semitism. Presenting a united front seems at the same time to result in a broad consensus and responsibility in the society for the mutual respect and even for the cooperation of people of different faiths and nationality. The enforcement of this process can improve the state of mind and moral stability of the whole society. It was a great pleasure for me to participate at the invitation of Mazsihis and of the local Jewish community, firstly, in the inauguration of a renewed synagogue in Buda. Then later, in the laying of the foundation stone of a new synagogue in Chapel. These occasions are the signs of hope for us, and they show at the same time that we will have many valuable common tasks together in the future as well. Thank you very much for your attention.